For a few years in a row, Motorola has done some kind of magic in the budget section of smartphones, always bringing the best experience at a crazy price. They outsold pretty much any competition. I was just in love with the G series since its first generation, and I've handled every single one since then. But last year I started to feel a bit weird about it, and this year I totally think they took advantage of our love for this series, and they delivered another power device with a somewhat of a recycled design, thinking that we're blind or something. So this is a Moto G5S. Let's see what we have here. I'll start talking about the design as always, which has some good and some bad things. I'll start with the back, which on first glance looks pretty good. We have a metal unibody design with some chamfered edges that look pretty premium. We have the good old Motorola dimple that I love, but here's where things start to get ugly. We have a huge hump for the camera module that I can't understand why is it so huge. Really now, it makes somewhat of a sense on the Plus version with the dual cameras, but here, and you can tell the sensor is pretty small and so is the flash. I don't like it at all. It wobbles, staying flat on a surface, and it just looks weird. It's like going back to the old Nokia and Sierra style. Turning it around to the front, we have a similar story. It just seems like a dated design. We have the front-facing camera, the earpiece, and an LED flash again for the front-facing camera. I have to say, I appreciate that. Then we have the display with some pretty large bezels on sides and both a brow and a chin. We have this fingerprint sensor in the middle of the bottom side, and we have the home, back, and multitask buttons on the screen on top. I was going to diss them for eating off my screen when they could have put the buttons on the side of the fingerprint sensor like Samsung does, but then I saw they did something else. They've put a toggle that you can switch from the Moto app, which hides the on-screen buttons and turns the fingerprint sensor into a multi-function button. It's a bit confusing at first, but you get used to it pretty quickly. It's interesting and useful, but I prefer how Meizu implemented it. An interesting approach nonetheless. The fingerprint sensor itself works pretty well. I have nothing to complain here. It's very fast and responsive, and the position and size are just perfect. Going back to the sides, we have the power button and the volume rockers on the right side, and I like the fact that the power button has a different texture than the volume ones, and that way you won't mistake them. Then on the left side we have the very popular now dual SIM / micro SD card hybrid slot. On the top we have a Lonely headphone jack, and on the bottom we have the speaker and the micro USB port. Another device without USB-C, not a big deal, but I think they could have put it in there. Going back to that display, we have a 5.2 inches IPS LCD panel with a resolution of 1080 by 1920 and a pixel density of 424 ppi. While I'm glad I'm seeing a full HD display after the last two reviews, I can't say I'm surprised by it. It's a normal display. I miss the deep blacks of the Samsung's AMOLED, but this is fine as well. It's crisp, being a full HD display in a 5.2 inch size, and you have good colors and great viewing angles, but it's not that bright outdoors. It's not as immersive as other phones with a more pronounced 2.5D curvature on the edges, but that might just be a personal preference. Besides that, it's a good panel, perfectly capable of reading, playing games, and media consumption, although the speaker is on the bottom and you can block it depending on how you use it. The speaker itself is pretty loud, although it tends to distort at max volume. It has much high end and pretty much no low end, which is a combo that I personally don't like, but yeah, at least it's loud. Switching to media creation and getting the big elephant out of the room, we have a single 16 megapixel camera on the back with an f2.0 aperture that delivers quite decent photos. In good lighting it gets some good results, although it tends to over sharpen a bit, and it seems like the vibrance is cranked up pretty high as well for my taste. Also, it has a hard time getting the exposure right, so often you'll end up with blown highlights unless you adjust it manually when taking the photo. I prefer the camera from the Xiaomi A1 as it's more natural and you have dual lenses both for zoom and for portrait mode. I know what you think, get the G5S Plus then, but that's going up to $300, and even so I personally didn't touch it, but from the reviews I saw the portrait mode from the Plus version is pretty useless. But anyways, do what you consider right. Going back to this device and into video recording, we have 1080p video here, no 4K sadly, which you do get in other devices at this price, and you don't have image stabilization either. On the front facing camera we have a 5 megapixel sensor with the same f2.0 aperture and again an LED flash. And here we have pretty much the same story when it comes to quality. Nothing to be surprised of, and again it tends to over sharpen. The flash helps in interior and night selfies, but don't expect it to magically make your selfies great. Anyways, all in all we have some decent cameras. Getting to the main hardware of this device, we have a Snapdragon 430 octa-core processor running at 1.4 GHz, accompanied by the Adreno 505 graphics, 3GB of RAM and 32GB of internal storage that is expandable via microSD. If that hardware sounds familiar, that's because it's the standard hardware of any low-end device. It's pretty much the same hardware in terms of processor and graphics as the Redmi 4X that I reviewed last week, but that was aimed as a low-end device at $110. This is not, according to the price, and that's what bothers me. How did we come from a Snapdragon 617 in the G4 to a 430 in the G5S, which should have been an improvement from the G5, which had the exact same hardware? This was not a nice move by Motorola, but I guess they don't have much to say about it being under Lenovo's hand. I guess that's why they started using MediaTek processors in the E and C series, when this is the processor that should have been in them. But anyways, I'm sorry for getting carried away there for a second. It's just that I had a very personal relationship with the G series and it disappointed me. The saving hand for this device comes from the software, which Motorola always nailed. It's pretty much stock Android experience with some useful features like the gestures to trigger the camera or the flashlight, placing the phone face down to silence notifications and calls, the possibility of using the fingerprint sensor as a multifunction button, Moto display, and so on and so on. The software is just lovely. More precisely, we have Android 7.1.1 here, and this device is supposed to update to Oreo pretty soon, which is good to know. Thanks to the 3GB of RAM and the software, performance is quite good. You do have slightly longer loading times in games and some more power-hungry apps, but in day-to-day use it works just fine. Which again, so did the $100 phone I reviewed last week. Yes, you can play games on it, you can edit photos for your Instagram, you can multi-window with lighter apps, and you can multitask as well. I was actually impressed with the multitasking. I sometimes opened apps that I have left in multitasking the last day, and they would still open where I left off. And other times, if I reopen an app I left in multitasking 1 hour ago, it wouldn't open where I left off. So yeah, take multitasking with a grain of salt. But anyways, all in all, decent performance for the average user. When it comes to battery, we have a 3000 mAh battery, and I have to say the battery life wasn't that positive in my case. I was barely getting to the end of the day. I was getting way better battery life on the Galaxy J5, but I guess the display technology and resolution were responsible for that. What saved this phone was the quick charging capability. We have Turbo Boost here, no Qualcomm's quick charge technology, although it is compatible with Quick Charge 2.0, so yeah, that gave a little juice when I needed it, but as I said in the Galaxy J5 review, I much prefer a battery that lasts me a full day with no problem than being able to charge it quicker, because I still need an outlet to charge it. And another thing about this phone, it has the loudest and weirdest vibration I've ever seen. Is disturbingly loud. If it vibrates in your pocket, the person on the other side of the room will hear it. I just hate it and turned it off completely. It's just awful. So this was my experience with the Moto G5S, and I have to say I'm leaving this phone quite disappointed, as it didn't deliver to the essence of the G series in my opinion. One reason why the first generations of this series did so well was because the competition in the budget section was just awful. The companies just didn't struggle to bring us quality technology in the mid and low end, and Motorola was probably one of the first who invested in those consumers. So for that reason we should be thankful to the G series. It's just that now the competition surpassed them, bringing better packages and a more competitive price. And finally we got here to the price, which in this case we're talking about 239 euros here in Spain or 219 pounds in the UK. When you can get the better spec Xiaomi A1 with stock Android straight from Google at an even lower price, it's just a no-brainer. They should have put this price on the Plus version, then it would have been more comparable, but this way I don't think any of the G5Ss make sense. Is it a bad phone? No, not at all, it's just that there are better options out there for this price. So I hope that this review was useful, and if you liked it and it helped you in any way, please give a like on this video and comment down below. I'll be glad to read your opinion. And if you like the style of these videos, please consider subscribing to this channel. I post a new video every week, and that way you won't miss any of them. Anyways guys, I thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.